Hello and welcome to Retroformat Live, Q&A. I'm Sean P. Malone, cinematographer and proud board member at Retroformat Silent Films. Tonight I'm thrilled to be speaking to James L. Neibaur, a film historian and educator who has written several books, many books on film, including Arbuckle and Keaton, their 14 film collaborations, Chaplin at Essanay, a film artist in transition, and somewhat the subject of tonight's conversation, the Charley Chase Talkies, 1929 to 1940. James is a highly respected member of our film community, and he's graciously offered to spend some time tonight talking to me and you all about Charley Chase. So thank you, James, so much for being here, and welcome.
Welcome. Yes, thank you very much. Good to have me.
Yeah, good to have you.
Good to have me.
So What Price, Goofy, and Bad Boy?
Mm-hmm.
These are the two films we watched tonight. Simply put, these are very tight, very well-made films that are very funny. I've watched a lot of silent films the last few years, many of them comedies, and What Price, Goofy in particular had me, LOLing, as the kids say, more than most. I actually love sitcoms, modern sitcoms, and this film just, I guess, appealed to me on that level. It's a great situation comedy.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. When Charley Chase hooked up with Leo McCarey, they really connected on several different levels, mostly creatively. And a lot of people, because Leo McCarey went on to such great things, a lot of people thought it was McCarey that influenced Chase, but it was the other way around. Charley Chase really influenced Leo McCarey, and but the two connected really well. And Chase was just transitioning from one-reelers to two-reelers, the longer format. And so he was going from his razzle-dazzle 1920s Jimmy Jump character and transitioning into something, I don't know if sophisticated is the word, but just slightly more refined and, as you say, more situational rather than gag-oriented. The gags were there, but they were highlights within the situation. And What Price, Goofy is a series of situations with so many really great visual ideas.
Well, it's funny you brought up Leo McCarey like right out of the box, because that was actually my first question and a great transition. I read in your book, The Charley Chase Talkies, this quote where he was quoted later in life saying, "It was really Chase who did most of the directing. Whatever success I've had or may have had, I owe to his help because he taught me all I know." I mean, first of all, how generous of a thing to say, right? But also, it just struck me, it's a huge credit to Charley Chase and his directorial abilities. And he'd spent a lot of time directing before these, going back in front of the camera. Isn't that correct?
Well, that's what he originally pretty much was. I mean, he was directing all the way back to, he started out in the Max Sennett Keystone stuff. So it was really frenetic and fast-paced and action-packed. And those are all very brilliant in their own way. So by the time he was working for Hal Roach, there was a refinement in style, and it became less frenetic and more of a methodical pace to the gags. For something like What Price, Goofy, there's a lot of elements to it, like the scene when the professor's at the house, for instance, when they're just missing each other. They're both using the bathroom. Charlie's washing up and she's taking a shower, and neither are aware of each other. And you can imagine the perfect timing. I mean, the camera is pretty much fixed. It's not doing a lot of angle stuff, but it's all the actors. They're doing everything. And the timing they must have to walk in the door just as he goes behind the door, and then she comes in, gets into the shower just as, and when things happen, like he throws something aside that she had carefully placed on a chair, well, then of course the dog, Buddy, comes in, and she thinks, oh, the dog did it. It's all just so perfectly done. And that's one of the many highlights of this little 19-minute comedy.
I think that's one feature of a really a well-done comedy bit, is that there's the idea of suspension of disbelief, right? But the things that happen in that scene, like the placing of the towel, and then the towel gets picked up, and the placing of the garment, and the garment gets put in the laundry bag, and then those moments where they're scratching their heads, didn't I just put that thing there? You're with it the whole way, because it's all very relatable and very human. You know, it just seems like, yeah, that's something I've done before. I could see myself in this situation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I consider the day a success when I can find my car keys by noon. So pretty much understandable by me. But the other thing I noticed is there's the scene where Charley Chase is kind of playing with the dog. You know, that sort of a transitional scene before the professor stuff starts and after the wife has left.
Right.
There's that little scene where he's kind of playing hide and go seek with the dog to show the dog's talents. And the way it's shot, whether it's Chase's vision or McCary's vision, the way they show the expanse of the house and all the negative space to remind us that this is a wealthy guy that we're dealing with here. And he has a lot of nice things and he has a nice life and a nice setup. So the very fact that a colleague can just send him a note saying, yeah, I'm sending somebody over to stay at your house. And the person just shows up with that note. There's no advance. I guess that's how rich people lived in the 20s. But that seemed like, oh, okay, yeah, let him in.
Well, the other thing that impressed me about that scene was it's such an entertaining scene by itself, but it's not thrown away. It's really important to the plot and
panic to the plot because the dog keeps bringing the undergarment.
Yeah, it's a setting a foundation for those gags later with the dog, and that was some of the funniest stuff where he tucks the. I guess it was a negligee into his shirt as a napkin, but so funny.
I also love the surrealism of Noah Young coming to break into the house to rob it, and sees it as an opportunity, and he's saying, "Hey, come here, you're a professor." And he uses them in the gag. And then the butler, Lucian Littlefield, making his first appearance in a Roach film. That's kind of interesting trivia because, I think of him as like in Dirty Work with Laurel and Hardy many years later as a talkie, as a crazy scientist. But he's making his first appearance in a Roach film here. And he's like, sort of helping out the master of the house as he believes is his duty, where the professor is stomping on the ground, wondering why they're not bringing her up something to eat. And the wife is wondering, what? Yeah, she goes running, what is that? And then the butler starts dancing. Oh, no, it's just me. All of this is so, imagine thinking of that. Imagine, I don't know if it was storyboarding or just, throwing ideas out at each other. But imagine he and McCary talking about the ideas and coming up with things like, then she starts stamping and the wife goes to look and the butler's dancing. It's so clever. It's so creative and outrageously funny.
Yeah, it really was tightly done. And I feel like I should have mentioned this minutes ago, but Leo McCary, for our audience, he's the director of these shorts. Went on to direct some really well-known movies like An Affair to Remember.
Going My Way and Duck Soup with the Marx Brothers.
That's right. Yeah, Duck Soup, which is, good. Oh, man.
Yeah.
You want to be in stitches, watch Duck Soup. So let's talk about Bad Boy real quick. What are some moments from Bad Boy that stand out to you as particularly memorable or particularly maybe we could hone in on Chase's screen persona, right? What are some things about it that might have been particularly him,
Well, a few different things. First of all, this was only his second two-reeler because he had been making the one-reelers. This is only his second. I think the first one was Hard Knocks. So in this second one, he's still Jimmy Jump. He hasn't quite transitioned to the later character we find in What Price Goofy, made just a few films later. He's just transitioning out, so we see elements of both. There's the situational thing where he has Dad, the tough iron worker who rose to the very top in the business world, and then we have the prim, proper mother. And so we have both elements of Charley Chase. We have him attempting, when the dad says, yep, start at the bottom, go down, and he's got to work with the iron workers, and they're lifting these heavy bricks. He not only has trouble lifting one, he ties it to a tow truck and walks along with the tow truck while the other guys in this beautiful shot that contains all the action in the frame are carrying all these bricks, and his one brick he's got on a tow truck, and he's walking along not carrying anything. That is such a brilliant visual and really funny. And also the scene where he's doing sort of like an Isadore Duncan dance with all the girls in the yard because his mother asked him to do that. He's flitting around with the dance, and then his girl sees him and, I don't want this guy.
Right.
Because the gender roles were so defined. And so he seems way more comfortable dancing in the yard with the girls, did the little ballet thing, than he did working with the iron workers.
Yeah.
And that makes it just as funny. Well, he's got to redeem himself, so he goes in and tries to pretend to be a tough guy and is mistaken for one in that bar. And Noah Young, once again, is in it. And then it's sort of like Harold Lloyd's Grandma's Boy, where a weakling realizes he has these reserves of strength, and then he comes out and suddenly is able to utilize them, because he's kind of pushing everybody around, and they're kind of taking it until I believe it's Noah Young again, picking up a newspaper, seeing a big photograph of when Charley was dancing with the girls. And because she's a society person, she's in the society column, and he looks at Charley in the garb with the, the flowers and everything in his hair, and the look on his face, and then he looks up at Charley Chase. I mean, the nuance that these comedians had for a visual medium before they had dialogue to work with. It's amazing what they could call up so subtly and make it so funny and, further enhance the gag.
Obviously with silent comedy, there's so much we see that sort of prefigures later TV and movies that we're all familiar with. In What Price Goofy, the bathroom scene made me think about The Parent Trap, the classic, Haley Mills and Haley Mills. There's that scene with the ex-wife and the ex-husband, and they're going in and out of the bathroom. It's like, that seems to be taken straight from, that premise. And then also, I kept thinking in Bad Boy about the show Frasier. I don't know how familiar you are with Frasier, but it was one of my favorite shows. And, here we got these kind of rich guys, not terribly masculine a lot of times, put in these funny situations where they have to act tough or impress their dad, or where they have to basically put on airs no matter where they are,
There's a lot of scenes like that in Frasier, like when they both needed to learn to ride a bike because they never did their entire childhood, things like that.
Yeah.
The little asides that John Mahoney would toss off as Marty Crane, where Frasier at one point was seeing two women, and he said, I don't know how I thought I could juggle two women. And I think it was, the line was, neither do I. You couldn't catch a balloon till you were 10.
Yeah.
And that is a similar dynamic to Grandma's Boy or, Bad Boy or something like that, where the tough, father. But the rich, sophisticated, different situations of What Price Goofy, you can see how Charley Chase, his comedies were so foundational to later things like that. Yeah. I even noticed in Bad Boy when he was dancing, he did that curly shuffle thing where he kicks his leg back and goes back. And then I realized that Charley Chase directed the Three Stooges in the 30s. And I'm wondering if Chase gave that bit to Curly. A Three Stooges expert would know when it was, in which film it was first used. I enjoyed them, but I really don't know the answer to that. I wonder if it's in a Chase-directed short and Charley gave that to him. I might be way off, but all I know is Chase and Martha Sleeper, no less, used it in...
you're talking about that moment in the dance hall, right? When he's acting tough.
Yeah.
She does the leg kick, but then he does it right after her.
Right. Martha Sleeper was born in 1910, so she's like 15 when she made this movie.
Wow, you're kidding me.
Yeah, for years they said 1907, but I guess after she died, birth certificates and things started to turn up, and she was born in 1910, so she was just a kid.
Wow.
And she stayed with Chase in several films. I know she was really good in, I believe it was Crazy Like a Fox was the name of the movie where I thought she was particularly good. Yeah, she left. I think there was a downsizing at Roach in the late 20s, and she left and went on to other things.
it was a great supporting cast in both these films. And Noah Young pops up. You know, we've done a couple of Harold Lloyd shows.
Yeah,
and
he's great with Lloyd.
Every time Noah Young comes on screen, I get excited because first of all, he's just such a great face, and he's so funny. I mean, he really is a great comic actor.
I'm unfortunately blanking on the girl in What Price Goofy, and she's a significant actress who worked with Chase many times.
Was that Catherine Grant?
Catherine Grant. Catherine Grant, I always love what she does in the Chase films. She worked for Roach for a while, and mostly with Charley Chase. And like I said, when he would do tours to like promote his films, I think Catherine Grant worked with him on stage. And she died young. She was hit by a car, and she tried to go right back to work a few days later. You know, thinking I don't want to lose my spot, type of thing.
Oh yeah.
But later on, she ended up in a sanitarium. I think the injuries were such that medical technology wasn't as sophisticated. They probably couldn't find a lot of things back then that they could. But she ended up, I think, getting some level of dementia, even as a young woman.
Oh, that's tragic. And, learning more about Charley Chase was also kind of sad to see how short his life was.
Leo McCarey might be his greatest collaborator, along with his own brother, James Parrott, who had his own set of issues. But some of the sound films that he made in collaboration with his brother were really outstanding.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So he was one of the few silent comedians who transitioned into sound actually quite well.
His sound films, it's because those situations play well with dialogue, and Charley Chase could sing. He used to sing on stage and stuff. So he would add songs to his movies, and those were delightful. So it just added another element. I did a book on the Charley Chase Talkies, and just looking at the whole trajectory from the early Talkies when they were just starting to get into it, all the way to where he ended up at Columbia, where he was doing, where the Three Stooges were, where he was directing them, and where he was doing more slapstick knockabout type stuff. But he did just fine. His films continue to be funny right to the end. I mean, one of his very last films is The Heckler, where he plays a really obnoxious sports fan, and it's one of the funniest movies he ever made.
What are some of the main stylistic or formal differences between his silent movies and his sound movies?
Well, it's because the silents are a very visual medium. Chase could have real nuanced. He would do reactions that were very intimate and nuanced for a silent film that, with visuals. And parts like, what we were talking about walking through the bathroom and stuff like that. That's a very, very visual thing. Yeah. He still did that in sound films because cinema is still visual, but he added the element of dialogue where he could do wordplay, where his voice could sound, he didn't have to just look shy. He could have a shy sounding voice or a bashful sounding voice or a forceful sounding voice, however worked with the character. And like in The Heckler, that's very dialogue driven because he's sitting in the stands and hollering at the ball players and annoying everyone around him. Well, that wouldn't have worked as effectively in a silent movie. He probably would have been able to do it with slapstick gags, but it's funnier hearing him. And of course, the addition of the songs in the sound movies gives them just another element of enhancement. So they're as good as each other. I don't know that one is better than the other. I'm sure fans would argue with me, but I think the silent and the sound Charley Chase comedies are as good as each other. They're just different because of the medium.
So Charley, his silent movies were great. His sound movies were great. We've seen two really great examples tonight. But he's not quite as well remembered, or his legacy isn't quite as strong as maybe, say, the Three Stooges or Laurel and Hardy. So, what do you think is maybe the cause of that in his case?
Well, I remember back in the 70s when, the Leonard Maltin books started coming out, the great movie shorts. And the Robert Youngson compilations with the clips from silent comedies, we started to get to know Charley Chase. We would see his name as a director on the Three Stooges, and we would see him in Sons of the Desert, the Laurel and Hardy feature, where he has a really funny cameo. But we didn't realize that he was a star in his own right, because the films weren't so accessible as all that. But now with home video, I mean, all these, just about all of the Chase comedies that are available are now accessible. There's several volumes of his silents that are out there, and just about all of his Roach shorts and literally all of his Columbia shorts are on DVD now. So there is greater access, and I think he's a little better known now. I don't know that he's known in the mainstream like the Three Stooges, but they've never left television. They're the short comedy comparative to something like I Love Lucy, where they've just always been there, and generation upon generation are always going to know and see them. Whereas Charley Chase didn't get that level of exposure, and so that's part of this situation too. But as far as the accessibility and availability of his films, I think it's better now than it's ever been.
Sure. In that way, a little bit like Harold Lloyd, right? Mm-hmm. Absent from TV for a while, but man, we have a lot of these films available to us now.
Yeah, I think it was at the end of the 70s or maybe around 1980 when Time Life got a hold of his films and started putting them on the PBS stations. I had read about Harold Lloyd for probably a decade, maybe more, before I finally got to see all these classics. I could see the short films that were Black Hawk would put out on 8mm, like Haunted Spooks and His Royal Slyness. But I couldn't see Safety Last or The Kid Brother or any of these these classics that I could only read about because Lloyd himself didn't make them available. And eventually that changed. I think his granddaughter had a lot to do with that, right? Suzanne?
Yes, yeah, Suzanne Lloyd. She's been, I mean, that's been her mission, is to reintroduce him to generations.
And he absolutely deserves it.
Yeah.
So.
And so does Charley Chase.
Certainly. Yeah.
That's the joy of being a board member of Retroformat and doing these screenings and Q&As, is that it's a journey of self-discovery and of joy for me, just to constantly be seeing these great artists who are new to me. You know what I mean?
In film history, the discoveries that you can just make forever. I've been into this stuff. I think I started getting into classic cinema around 1969. And now over 50 years later, I'm still finding new stuff, still learning stuff. I mean, it's wonderful. It's fascinating.
Maybe one or two more questions, James. I don't want to let you go quite yet because I haven't learned a lot about you. I wanted to ask you, what circumstances led you to write the Charley Chase Talkies?
Well, I had been a fan of his ever since, I'd say around 1970, maybe 71. They had a 12-hour comedy film festival for charity. And these are 16mm films here in town where I live at a museum. And a friend of mine and I went, and one of the films they showed was Girl Grief, a Hal Roach talkie with Charley Chase. And it was one of the funniest things we'd ever seen. We were laughing all the way through. Now, I was aware of Charley Chase from, like I said, the Youngson compilations and, anything that might have been written, because I was just into that stuff. And so I had an awareness of him. But I had never seen one of his talkies before. And that's what introduced me. And I've been a fan since. Over time, I had 16mm films, so I had a few of those. I think I at one time had Girl Grief. And then later on, some of the stuff came out on VHS, and I started to get those. And eventually, I got to see pretty much everything. But at the time I wrote my book, all these DVDs weren't out yet. So I had to rely on collectors would send me 16mm prints, the things that I had of my own and stuff. Some of the stuff was on VHS, but I managed to get a hold of all of them that I needed to see for the book. And so I felt that, there hadn't been a full, complete book. There had been a biography, and a very good one, but there hadn't been a film-by-film look at Charley Chase's work. And his career was too long to put in just one book. So I had to concentrate on a portion of it. And I chose the talkies because at the time, they were the easiest for me to get a hold of. and because there's still some silence we can't get a hold of, but the talkies now are all pretty much all accessible. So
I want to tell our viewers they can find your books on Amazon. And I wanted to ask you, what are you working on now, and what's upcoming from James L. Neibaur?
I just had a book come out a couple months ago on director William Bodine, who has this terrible reputation, and it's really unfair because Kevin Brownlow, the Kevin Brownlow, was championing his work, Bodine's work in silent films, and so I explored it a little more because I really liked the B-movie stuff that he did, and I found out more and more about it, and I decided to do a book, and I contacted Mr. Brownlow, and he sent me a bunch of materials. So I ended up dedicating the book to him because it was very, very helpful, and I got to see that he was really a great director who ended up in B-movies because he was one of the top directors in Hollywood, went to England for several years and worked there. And when he came back, there was no place for him. He had lost his spot, basically. And the best he could do was low budget. And so he flourished in that and had a lot of really good ideas. Because he directed movies like Bela Lugosi Meets a Brooklyn Gorilla and Billy the Kid Meets Dracula, he's defined by those movies.
Sure.
And that's not his entire career.
Sure.
So I have that. That's my most recent book that's out. I finished one, a film-by-film look at Clark Gable's films of the 1930s. That's coming out later this year, I believe. And right now, I'm co-writing a book on the Frank Sinatra films with another writer. And then I have contracts to follow that with a book on Joe E. Brown's films, comedian Joe E. Brown, and then John Garfield, after John Garfield. The Garfield book, I have contracts for all those. The Garfield book will be my 30th book, so that's a little bit of a milestone.
That's fantastic. Well, you're doing great work. For those of us that love film, it's really important work, and I'm so glad that you were able to talk to us about some of it tonight.
It was great to help.
And I wanted to say right before we go, any other Charley, you mentioned The Heckler, any other Charley Chase films, if this piqued our audience's interest, that they might want to check out?
Oh boy, I would say to start with some of the DVD sets of The Silence that show his growth, that show some of the stuff he was doing at Keystone on one disc, and then some of the stuff he did at Roach on another, and then a third disc where he was just the director. And that really starts to, get you involved. And from there, you can there's DVDs of his talkies. Kit Parker Films put out a couple volumes of his Roach shorts, and the Columbias are out there, which contain The Heckler. So there's a lot of places to go. Wherever you start, you can springboard from there. I'm a little bit of an evolutionist, as it were. So I like to start, with the early stuff and work my way up to watch the development. And that's what I would recommend.
Just to let our viewers know, too, these films tonight came from the Milestone Cinematheque video. And
excellent set.
You can definitely pick that up. Also, I highly recommend it. James, that's about all the time we have. But again, thank you so much for your time and for sharing this knowledge with us. Quick reminder to our audience before we sign off. If you're watching and you enjoyed tonight's performance and Q&A, please consider making a suggested donation of $7 to Retroformat by visiting retroformat.org/donate. Your support means the world to us. And we look forward to seeing you all in 2 more weeks for the next installment of Retroformat Live. I'm Sean P. Malone. Good night, everyone.